chasing you with his flashlight. Woo! Do you know why I pulled you over? No. Got you doing 7. How'd you like to go to court on that? Mr. Upton, been charged with doing 7 and a 5. How do you plead? Embarrassed. In the state of Washington, where I'm from, we have some of the most restrictive anti-smoking laws in the country due to secondhand smoke. They're good laws. You know what I'm tired of, though? We need a law about? Everywhere I fly now, I have to sit like this. You know what I'm getting tired of? Secondhand fat. Every time I get on a jet, there's a 600-pounder coming down the aisle. I'm like, oh, no, not. They always say the same thing. Can I sneak past you? Your sneaking days are over, my friend. You sneak past the Golden Corral one time, right? You guys can relax on that joke. I look around the room before I do it. Sometimes I have to change it to 800. Felt pretty safe at 600 tonight. If you saw my last special, I made fun of millennials. I don't know if you remember that or not. It was quite popular. Do we have anybody here tonight under the age of 30? Any 20-somethings? That's still the dumbest group of humans I've ever met in my life. You're not dumb academically, I'll get to that, but you are soft emotionally, I can tell you that. The reason I say that, when I was growing up, our parents let us play in the street, climb trees, and blow stuff up. And you know what happened if you got hurt or maimed? You got a new name. Two friends I grew up with, Amer and Niner. When Amer was 6, he was in the garage with his big brothers blowing stuff up. He lost his right eye. It was closed the rest of his life. He looked like he was aiming a gun. That's how he got the name Amer. He was the Amer. Everybody called him Amer. I did not know his name was not Amer. Till the first day of 3rd grade, the teacher said, Ross Thomas. We all went, Ross Thomas, who? Amer, is your name Ross? We started laughing. That sounded funnier to us than Amer did. And Amer says to the teacher, no, my name's Amer. My mom is the only one that calls me Ross. And she goes, well, Amer, how'd you get that name? He goes, do you imagine now a kid even pretending to point a gun at a teacher? There'd be a lockdown. There'd be a helicopter above the school. My friend Niner in the 4th grade, there were 4 of us who were all out in the woods together. We were all climbing trees. We were all up about 15 feet, and he fell. And on the way down, he was trying to grab branches, and by the time he hit the ground, he'd lost most of his ring finger. And every time I tell this story, I still picture it. It's 55 years ago. It still makes me laugh. Because he got up and he's dusting himself off. He's going, I'm bleeding somewhere. I'm bleeding. I'm cut. I don't know what. And my other friend says, look at your hand. And he screamed and he ran home. And we all climbed down and followed him, but none of us thought to look for his finger. About 4 days later, he's back in class. His hand's all heavily bandaged up. We're learning about decimal points for the first time in our life. He raises his hand. He says, I have 9.2 fingers.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, Wasden Wednesday, July the 5th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we'll have No Free Lunch, The Rape of the Mind, Vivek-Ramaswamy, Stuart-Varney, Donald Trump, Mark Robinson, and SEAL Team 6. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, His grace uncrown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. America, yeah, beautiful America, yeah. From sea to shining sea, shining sea. Beautiful America, yeah. Beautiful America, yeah. From sea to shining, shining sea. Oh, beautiful nature tree that sees beyond the east. Thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human heart. America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining
Thank you. And now there's no free lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
The ultimate ends of the activities of reasonable beings are never economic. Money is one of the greatest instruments of freedom ever invented by man. F.A. Hayek. Humans act. They act out of pursuit of their dreams, their quests, their aspirations. Money provides an instrument in that action, but it is not and can never be the essence of the action itself. We develop a more exhaustive understanding of economics when we study the actions that undergird human endeavor and resist the temptation to reduce the field to mathematical and monetary measurements.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. So who is the true conservative? He is the person that has the courage of his convictions and is confident in what he knows. He is the person that understands that culture trumps politics. He's not selfish, but minds his own business. He does not go looking for trouble. He is alert. He curbs his curiosity, and he acts like an adult. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He is judgmental and moralizes. He refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why, rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American, and he is better than the socialist. He's a better friend, father, brother, family member, and a better person, period. You have to know that being a true conservative is best, or you are wasting your time. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Vivek-Ramaswamy.
It's our son Arjun's first birthday today. And in honor of that, my wife Apurva and I are committing to fund a new scholarship to foster American national pride among young Americans. It's going to be called the American Identity Scholarship. It's going to allow 10 high school students across the country to win a $25,000 scholarship, making it one of the largest scholarships in the country, for submitting a compelling and concise video explaining why it is they're proud to be an American, and most importantly, what it means to be an American. That's something that we don't talk about enough. Ask young people across the country today, what does it mean to be an American? You often get a blank stare in response. That's the vacuum at the heart of our national soul. Less than 16% of Gen Z says they're proud to be American today. We have a 25% recruitment deficit in the U.S. military. Amongst users of TikTok who are teenagers, about 60% of them say they would rather give up their right to vote than to give up their social media accounts. This is dire, but we're not going to sit around and wait for the government to solve all of our problems. Many of those problems require those of us who are parents, those of us who have lived the American dream, to step up and do our part in addressing those problems as well. That's what we're doing today. The scholarship will be run and administered by Incubate Debate, a nonprofit that fosters debate amongst young Americans and high school students. And I'm going to be looking forward to playing my role in reviving our national pride amongst young Americans who badly lack it. More to...
And that was Vivek-Ramaswamy. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from Stuart-Varney.
A federal judge issued a motion yesterday that blocks President Biden from colluding with social media companies on protected speech. Grady Trimble at the White House this morning. Grady, has the White House responded to this yet?
Yes, Ash. The White House says that the Department of Justice is reviewing the court order and will evaluate its options in the case, adding that the administration has promoted responsible actions to protect public health, safety, and security when confronted by challenges like a deadly pandemic and foreign attacks on our elections. This order blocks the Biden administration, including the CDC, the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and others, from working with social media companies to flag and remove posts that contain protected speech under the First Amendment. In a 155-page ruling, the Trump-appointed judge says if the allegations made by plaintiffs are true, the present case arguably involves the most massive attack against free speech in United States history. Attorneys general in Louisiana and Missouri claim the government worked too closely with big tech companies like Facebook, Twitter, and Google to silence conservative speech. They cite examples like the Hunter Biden laptop story, the COVID-19 lab leak theory, and the efficacy of masks and vaccines during the pandemic. I asked Missouri's Attorney General if he expects the White House to fight back.
At the end of the day, they're going to want to continue to silence what they believe to be mis, dis, and malinformation. But the point is, the government shouldn't have any role in deciding what we should or shouldn't be talking about. And it's a scary world when bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. decide what isn't true.
And that was from Stuart-Varney about the Supreme Court ruling having to do with free speech. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
Mental coercion and enemy occupation. Those of us who lived in the Nazi-occupied countries during the Second World War learned to understand only too well how people could be forced into false confessions and into betrayals of those they loved. I myself was born in the Netherlands and lived there until the Nazi occupation forced me to flee. In the early days of the occupation, when we heard the first eyewitness descriptions of what happened during the Nazi interrogations of captured resistance workers, we were frightened and alarmed. The first aim of the Gestapo was to force prisoners under torture to betray their friends and to report new victims for further torture. The brown shirts demanded names and more names, not bothering to ascertain whether or not they were given falsely under the stress of terror. I remember very clearly one meeting held by a small group of resistors to discuss the growing fear and insecurity. Everybody at that meeting could expect to be mentioned and picked up by the Gestapo at some time. Should we be able to stand the Nazi treatment, or would we also be forced to become informers? This question was being asked by anti-Nazis in all the occupied countries. During the second year of the occupation, we realized that it was better not to be in touch with one another. More than 2 contacts were unsafe. We tried to find medical and psychiatric preventatives to harden us against the Nazi torture we expected. As a matter of fact, I myself conducted some experiments to determine whether or not narcotics would harden us against pain. However, the results were paradoxical. Narcotics can create pain insensitivity, but their dulling action at the same time makes people more vulnerable to mental pressure. Even at that time, we knew, as did the Nazis themselves, that it was not the direct physical pain that broke people, but the continuous humiliation and mental torture. One of my patients, who was subjected to such an interrogation, managed to remain silent. He refused to answer a single question, and finally the Nazis dismissed him. But he never recovered from his terrifying experience. He hardly spoke, even when he returned home. He simply sat, bitter, full of indignation, and in a few weeks he died. It was not his physical wounds that killed him, it was the combination of fear and wounded pride. We held many discussions about ways of strengthening our captured underground workers or preventing them from the final self-betrayal. Should some of our people be given suicide capsules? That could only be a last resort. Narcotics like morphine give only a temporary anesthesia and relief. Moreover, the enemy would certainly find the capsules and take them away. We had heard about German attempts to give cocaine and amphetamine to their air pilots for use in combat exhaustion, but neither medicament was reliable. These drugs might revive the body by making it less sensitive to pain, but at the same time, they dulled the mind. If captured members of the underground were to take them, as experiments had shown, their bodies might not feel the effects of physical torture, but their hazy minds might turn them into easier dupes of the Nazis. We also tried systematic exercise and mental retaliation and autohypnosis, comparable with yogi exercises, in order to make the body more insensitive to hunger and pain. If an individual's attention is fixed on the development of conscious awareness of automatic body functions, such as breathing, the alert functioning of the brain cortex can be reduced. The awareness of pain will diminish. This state of pain insensitivity can sometimes be achieved through autohypnotic exercises, but very few of our people were able to bring themselves into such anesthesia. Finally, we evolved this simple psychological trick. When you can no longer outwit the enemy or resist talking, the best thing to do is to talk too much. This was the idea. Keep yourself sullen and act the fool. Play the coward and confess more than there is to confess. Later, we were able to verify that this method was successful in several cases. Scatterbrained simpletons confused the enemy much more than silent heroes whose stamina was finally undermined in spite of everything. I had to flee to Holland after policemen warned me that my name had been mentioned in an interrogation. I had twice been questioned by the Nazis on minor matters and without bodily torture. When they later caught up with me in Belgium, probably as the result of a betrayal, I had to undergo a long initial examination in which I was beaten, fortunately not too seriously. The interview had started pleasantly enough. Apparently, the Nazi officer in charge thought he would be able to get information out of me through friendly methods. Indeed, we even had a discussion, since I am a psychiatrist, about the methods used in interrogation. But when he found that the friendly approach was getting him nowhere, the officer's mood changed, and he behaved with all the sadistic characteristics we'd come to expect from this type. Happily, I managed to escape from Belgium that very night before a more systematic and more torturous investigation could begin. Arriving at the London headquarters after an adventurous trip through France and Spain, I became chief of the psychological department of the Netherlands forces in England. In this official position, I was able to gather data on what was happening to the millions of victims of Nazi terror and torture. Later on, I questioned and treated several escapees from internment and concentration camps. These people had become real experts in suffering. The variety of human reactions under these infernal circumstances taught us an ugly truth. The spirit of most men can be broken. Men can be reduced to the level of animal behavior. Both torturer and victim finally lose all human dignity. My government gave me the power to investigate a group of traitors, and I also interrogated imprisoned Nazis. When I review all these wartime experiences, all the confusion about courage and cowardice, treason, morale, and mental fortitude, I must confess that my eyes were only really opened after a study of the Nuremberg trials of the Nazi leaders. These trials gave us the real story of the systematic coercive methods used by the Nazis. At about the same time, we began to learn about the perverted psychological strategy Russia and her satellites were using. Witchcraft.
And that was mental coercion and torture by Joost-meerlo, MD, from The Rape of the Mind. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of Donald Trump.
But today everything having to do with those courageous Americans who fought for us and sacrificed so strongly is indeed being destroyed under crooked Joe Biden, and he is crooked as hell, isn't he? You know, I've been hitting him much differently than I have because I've always respected the office. And then when they indicted me for nothing, I said, now the gloves are off. Now we have to say it like it is. He's a crook. Under crooked Joe Biden, I never called him that. I took the name away from Hillary Clinton. We call her Beautiful Hillary now, and because it was crooked Hillary, now it's crooked Joe, because it's a much more appropriate name right now for this man who's just destroying our country. But today everything having to do with those courageous Americans who fought for us and sacrificed so strongly is indeed being destroyed under crooked Joe Biden, and he is crooked as hell, isn't he? You know, I've been hitting him much differently than I have because I've always respected the office. And then when they indicted me for nothing, I said, now the gloves are off. Now we have to say it like it is. He's a crook. Under crooked Joe Biden, I never called him that. I took the name away from Hillary Clinton. We call her Beautiful Hillary now, and because it was crooked Hillary, now it's crooked Joe, because it's a much more appropriate name. Right.
Thank you. And now from an account called Mark Robinson.
But they know the story, and they know the playbook that they always have. Lie, deride, besmirch, make innuendos, tell flat-out untruths. Because you quoted Hitler, you support Hitler. I guess every history book in America supports Hitler now. They all quote him. And here's the thing. Whether you're talking about Adolf Hitler, whether you're talking about Chairman Mao, whether you're talking about Stalin, whether you're talking about Pol Pot, whether you're talking about Castro in Cuba, or whether you're talking about a dozen other despots all around the globe, it is time for us to get back and start reading some of those quotes. It's time for us to start teaching our children some of those quotes. It's time for us to start teaching our children about the dirty, despicable, awful things that those communist and socialist despots did in our history.
And that was Mark Robinson from a Twitter account. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, SEAL Team 6 by Howard Wasden, Chapter 4, Russian Sub and Green Hero.
4. Russian Sub and Green Hero. At the age of 20, after a year and a half of college, I used up the last of my hard-earned money and couldn't afford to go back to school. There wasn't a lot of financial aid available at the time, and I was tired of washing with leftover soap and was weary of searching for lost change on Thursday so I could enjoy 3 hot dogs for $1 night at the nearby convenience store. I decided to visit the military recruiters at the shopping mall in Brunswick, Georgia, hoping to join, save enough money, and return to college. A poster of a search and rescue SAR swimmer in a wetsuit hung outside the Navy recruiter's office. Later, I signed up to do search and rescue for the Navy. Before shipping out, I decided to marry Laura. My mom had one request: talk to Brother Ron first. I knew our preacher didn't like Laura. I knew he didn't agree with her Mormon religion. No, Mom, I won't do that. I'm not going to talk to Brother Ron. I love her, and I'm marrying her. Leon came into my room and with both hands pushed both of my shoulders, knocking me back a few steps. That was his big way of asserting dominance. If I looked at him or stepped forward, he would interpret that as a sign of aggression. I had learned to lower my head and stay back. If you can't listen to your mom about this one thing, you pack up and get the hell out of my house. I couldn't believe my ears. Yeah, I saw you just look at me, Dad said. You want to try me? Go ahead and try me. I'll go through you like a dose of salts. Epsom salts were used for constipation, and that was the South Georgia way of saying, I'll go through you like crap through a goose. He had just threatened me for the last time. I packed everything I could fit into a small suitcase, walked out the door, and headed down the street to a payphone. After I called Laura's house, her parents sent her to pick me up. Laura's family acted much different from my family. The kids and the parents talked. They had conversations. The parents were nice to the kids. Her father even told them good morning. That blew me away. They were loving and affectionate. I loved what their family had as much as I loved Laura. Her parents let me live with them until I could get a temporary construction job in a small apartment. Months after I left my home, Laura and I married in her church on April 16th, 1983. My parents grudgingly attended the small wedding. We lived in a town where it would have reflected poorly on them if they hadn't come. After Laura and I exchanged vows, my dad gave me a $100 bill and shook my hand without saying anything. No congratulations or go to hell. Needless to say, my parents didn't stay for cake. French kissing and love-making came naturally for me. Doing things like telling her I loved her and holding her hand were difficult. I was switched on or off. There was no in-between. I lacked a role model for being a husband and father. Dad never put his arm around my mother or held her hand. Maybe he did when I wasn't around, but I never saw it. Most of their conversation had only been about work or us kids. On November 6, 1983, I arrived at Navy boot camp in Orlando, Florida. 2 days later, we all had fresh buzz cuts and smelled like denim. At lights out, I told the guy in the bunk below me, "Hey, today was my birthday." "Yeah, man, happy birthday." He didn't give a crap. No one did. It was a bit of a reality check. The lack of discipline and respect among the recruits amazed me. So many got in trouble for forgetting to say yes, sir, or no, sir. I was raised to never forget my manners and never forget attention to detail. The guys doing extra duty, push-ups, stripping and waxing the floor looked like morons. Making your bed and folding your underwear isn't rocket science. I was raised to make my bed and fold my underwear. The company commander and I developed a bond. He'd had the same search and rescue job as an air crewman that I wanted. He put me in charge of half the barracks. After finishing almost 4 weeks of boot camp, a quarter of the recruits were still having problems. I couldn't understand it. Anyone who got in serious trouble had to go to intensive training, IT. I told my company commander, I want to go to IT to get in shape for my search and rescue physical screening test, sir. I don't remember what the exact SAR requirements were then, but today's candidates must swim 500 yards in 13 minutes, run 1.5 miles in 12.5 minutes, do 35 push-ups in 2 minutes, perform 50 sit-ups in 2 minutes, and do 2 pull-ups. If I failed the test, I would miss my big reason for joining the Navy, search and rescue. My company commander looked at me like I had a mushroom growing out of my head. Wasden, do you know what they do at IT? The guys that got in trouble told me they do a lot of exercise. He laughed. After evening chow, I arrived at IT and found out why he was laughing. IT busted my rump. We did push-ups, sit-ups, drills holding rifles over our heads, and much more. I looked to the left and to the right. The men on either side of me were crying. This is tough, but why are you crying? I'd experienced much worse. Sweat and tears covered the gym floor. I sweat, but I didn't cry. The people who ran IT didn't know I had volunteered for it. After showing up there for an hour nearly every evening, 7, 8, 9 times, they wanted to break me of my evil ways. I never told them any different. When I left boot camp, they must have thought Wasden was the biggest screw-up who ever came through here. I took the search and rescue screening test. At the pool, I saw a guy with an unfamiliar insignia on his chest. At the time, I didn't know he was a Navy SEAL, and I didn't know what a SEAL was. Most people didn't. The IT may have helped me prepare for the search and rescue test, if not physically, mentally. I passed. Even so, I was only 70% confident that I would be accepted to aircrew school. My fate lies in the hands of the Navy. What job will they make me do if I don't pass this? Toward the end of the 3-month Navy boot camp, my air crewman company commander gave me a smile and orders to attend aircrew school. I'll see you in the fleet, he said. I'd passed. That was the best day of my life. Laura came out to Florida to see me at boot camp graduation, staying the weekend. I had to remain in uniform even when we were off base. While we were eating dinner in a restaurant, a couple gave us tickets to Disney World and picked up my check on the way out. The next day, we explored the Magic Kingdom. There would be no married housing where Laura could stay with me while I attended aircrew school in Pensacola, Florida. At aircrew school, I got to wear flight suits, learned how to deploy the rescue raft out of an aircraft, ran the obstacle course, and boxed in the Navy smoker matches. Toward the end of the 6-week-long school, I attended a week of survival training. The instructors simulated our aircraft being shot down, and we had to survive, tie knots, cross a river, and build a tent out of a parachute, with only minimal food like broth and apples. During the last 3 days of the survival training, we only ate what we could find and were willing to put in our mouths. I wasn't ready to eat grub worms yet. My first boxing match was the night after returning from survival training. I told the coach, I've been out in the woods 3 days without eating. You think I'll be okay? Hell yeah. This jarhead has been cleaning our clocks. We need you to go in there and fight him. Thanks a lot, pal. My friends Todd Mock and Bobby Powell came to watch and provide moral support. Todd stood in my corner. I told him, wish I had more time to get ready for this fight. Just hit him more than he hits you. Great advice. The smokers were 3 3-minute rounds. Not a lot of pacing, just dumping everything you've got into every round. In the first round, I felt the Marine and I fought about evenly. In the second round, I didn't react quickly enough and got caught a couple of times. He's outclassing me. My arms felt weak. The 16-ounce gloves felt like 40 pounds. In the third round, I went to touch gloves with him, a silent courtesy that boxers show each other at the beginning of the last round. I put my right hand out and he sucker punched me. It hurt. Oh, did it hurt. Knocked me down on my knee. I stood up but had to take an 8 count. I wasn't Rocky. I was scared of getting hit again. After the 8 count, I came out wailing on the Marine with everything I had, scared to death he was going to hurt me again. In the end, I won the fight. The Navy fans went wild. I sat on the stool in my corner, exhausted. Looking at Todd, I said, "You and Bobby are going to have to help me get out." They literally carried me to the parking lot and put me in a car. After helping take off my gloves, they changed me into some sweats and drove me to a Wendy's where we ate. Later, they took me to the barracks and tucked me into bed. The next morning, I thought something was wrong with me. My face had puffed up and one eye had swollen shut. The other eye had partially closed. What happened? I was sick for 3 or 4 days. Fortunately, it was near the end of aircrew school and I graduated on time. In spite of the separation, Laura and I wrote each other letters, and I called her. She came out to visit me for the weekend following graduation. Our relationship seemed fine. After aircrew school, Todd, Bobby, and I moved down the street and started 12 weeks of search and rescue school. The place was intimidating. Names on the wall, gigantic indoor pool, mock door of an H-3 helicopter, and SAR instructors in their shorts and blue t-shirts. Man, these guys are gods. SAR school challenged me. We got comfortable being in the water, jumped in with all our gear on, swam to the rescue hoist, hooked our pilot to it, did hand signals, lit the Mark 13 flare, and simulated rescues. At the end of the school, for my final test, I had to complete a rescue scenario. One pilot sat in his raft, the other lay face down in the water. In the huge indoor pool, I jumped out of the mock helicopter door and into the pool, then took care of the face-down man. The pilot in the raft screamed at me, "Hey man, get me the hell out of here. He's dead. Don't worry about him." When I reached out to touch the face-down pilot, he sprang to life and grabbed me. I swam underwater where drowning men don't like to go. After maneuvering around him, I started a spinal highway on him, checking to see no parachute cord was wrapped around his body. He seemed okay, so I started swimming, but he wouldn't budge. I checked him again and found parachute cord around both his legs. After clearing the cord, I swam him over to the other guy's raft. The pilot in the raft started yelling at the pilot in the water, "It's your fault, you screwed up." I can't put this pilot in the same raft as the troublemaker pilot. After inflating his flotation device, I left him in the water tied to the raft. Entering the raft, I checked on the troublemaker. I hooked him up to the helicopter hoist and sent him up first. He fought me, so I had to wrestle him before sending him up. Then I hooked myself up with the pilot in the water and went up with him. Back in the locker room, some of my classmates hadn't returned. It hadn't dawned on me that they might have failed. I was still recovering from my rescue. 5 or 6 instructors stood around me. "Wasden, what did you do wrong?" Holy crap, I just failed search and rescue school and I have no idea why. They took a J-hook used for cutting parachute cord and cut off my white t-shirt. I tried to figure out what I'd missed. "Congratulations, Wasden, you just made it through SAR school." They gave me my blue shirt and threw me in the pool with my buddies who were treading water. All of them laughed their asses off at my traumatized face. They'd all been through the same. SAR graduation was more special than boot camp or aircrew graduation because SAR training seriously challenged me physically and mentally. After SAR school, I got even more schooling. Anti-submarine warfare at Millington, Tennessee. Even though there was still no married housing, Laura and I rented a small apartment off base. When she became pregnant, she returned to live with her parents until the baby was born. Then the Navy assigned me to a training squadron in Jacksonville, Florida, to put together everything I'd learned in aircrew, SAR, and anti-submarine warfare. Still in Jacksonville, I reported to my first real duty station at HS-7 Squadron, the Dusty Dogs, assigned to the aircraft carrier USS John F. Kennedy, CV-67. Although the Kennedy was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, my squadron would stay in Jacksonville, except for when the Kennedy deployed out to sea. On the morning of February 27th, 1985, Bobby Powell came into my room in the barracks and told me, "Your wife is having a baby." "Holy crap," I said. It would be a 2-hour drive from Jacksonville to the military hospital in Fort Stewart, Georgia. I called Laura's family. Her father answered the phone. "She's had a boy," he said. Still wearing my flight suit, I drove as fast as I could. Everything was okay until I got within 20 minutes of the hospital. Police lights flashed at me from the rear. Georgia State Highway Patrol. I pulled over and stopped. The officer parked behind me, stepped out of his vehicle, and strolled over to my door. "Where are you off to so fast, son?" Nervous and upset, I explained. "My wife had a baby and I've got to get to the hospital, sir. Driver's license." I handed it over. He looked at it. "I tell you what, I'll escort you to the hospital. If we get there and your wife really has had a baby, I'll give you your license back." He put my license in his shirt pocket. "If she hasn't, you're going to take a ride with me." He escorted me to the hospital parking lot, then walked with me into Laura's room. Among the visitors stood my mother, still mad at me for leaving home to marry Laura, but excited about her grandson. The patrol officer spoke with her. I held my beautiful baby boy, Blake, for the first time. I was so proud to be a father and an elite SAR swimmer. Life was good. After a while, I noticed the officer had disappeared. "Where's the state patrol officer? I need my driver's license back." My mom handed it to me. "The officer said to tell you congratulations." After Blake grew old enough, he and Laura moved down to Jacksonville to join me. On October 6th, 1986, a Russian Yankee-class nuclear submarine, K-219, sailing off the coast of Bermuda, experienced a failed seal on the missile hatch. Seawater leaked in and reacted with the missile liquid fuel residue, causing an explosion that killed 3 of its sailors. The sub limped toward Cuba. The John F. Kennedy's task force sent my helicopter out to track the Russian vessel. Usually we were supposed to fly within approximately 30 miles of our carrier group, but we had special permission to fly out farther. I wore my booties, a short-sleeve wetsuit top called a shorty, and my white cotton briefs, tighty-whities. Most guys wore wetsuit bottoms, but I took my chances that I might have to rescue someone in my tighty-whities. For outerwear, I wore my flight suit. We picked up the Russian sub on active sonar. Following close, we kept popping its butt with sonar pings. Suddenly, our pilot said, "Look at the temperature gauge on our main rotor transmission." Oh my. The gears burned hot enough to shear off. The pilot tried to take us to a hover just before we fell out of the sky. We didn't hit the water as hard as I expected, but we hit hard enough. "Mayday, mayday." As the first swimmer, I rushed to the co-pilot to help him attach the sea anchor and put it out the window. Next, I made sure the pilot and co-pilot exited the aircraft through the front escape window. Then I hurried to the rear of the cockpit where I made sure the first crewman had exited the side door. I took off my flight suit and put my swim fins, mask, and snorkel on. Finally, I kicked the raft out, inflated it, and helped the 2 pilots in. The other rescue swimmer was an older guy in his 40s. Instead of inflating his life vest and swimming to the raft, he hung onto a cooler for dear life, drifting out to sea. So I had to swim him down, bring him back to the raft, and get him inside. A disturbing thought occurred to me. What am I going to do if that Russian sub rises up underneath us? An anti-submarine jet, an S-3 Viking, flew over. Its low-pitched hum sounded like a vacuum cleaner. The plane came back to us at a 90-degree angle, probably noting our position. 30 minutes later, a helicopter arrived. I took the green sea dye marker, which looked like a bar of soap, and swished it in the water around the raft. We became a huge, fluorescent green target for the rescue helicopter to see. The helicopter came in low, and I signaled for them not to jump their swimmer. I put the pilot's helmet visors down to protect them from the stinging sea sprays the helicopter blades blasted. Then I swam everyone over to the rescue hoist, riding up myself with the last guy. After the adrenaline dump of the crash, swimming the other swimmer down and getting everyone to the hoist, I was wasted. In the helicopter, my buddy Dan Rucker, also a search and rescue swimmer, gave me a thumbs up. Our rescue helicopter landed on the aircraft carrier. We stepped out onto the flight deck. and everyone cheered, slapping me on the back, congratulating me for the rescue. Walking across the flight deck, I carried my swim fins, looking like the hero, except for my tidy whities. Now, my cotton briefs were tidy fluorescent greenies. My whole body glowed from the fluorescent green dye marker. It was embarrassing as hell. I would have given $1 million for my wetsuit bottom. Later, to my horror, others and I watched the scene all over again on the ship's video. A couple of weeks before my active duty contract with the Navy expired, I noticed 5 guys from a unit I'd never heard of. SEALs. In retrospect, they weren't even a standard 7 or 8 man SEAL squad. They seemed like a laser op team. 2 laser target designators, 2 spotters, and the lieutenant in charge, probably also running communications. They were in our search and rescue berthing space, so I started following them around, asking questions about the SEALs. During World War II, the 1st Navy frogmen were trained to recon beaches for amphibious landings. Soon they learned underwater demolitions in order to clear obstacles and became known as Underwater Demolition Teams, UDTs. In the Korean War, UDTs evolved and went farther inland, blowing up bridges and tunnels. Years later, after observing communist insurgency in Southeast Asia, President John F. Kennedy, who had served in the Navy during World War II, and others in the military understood the need for unconventional warriors. The Navy created a unit that could operate from sea, air, and land, SEALs, drawing heavily from UDTs. On January 1st, 1962, SEAL Team 1, Coronado, California, and SEAL Team 2, Little Creek, Virginia, were born. One of the first SEALs was Rudy Besch, a New Yorker and chief from UDT 21. Wearing his hair in a perfect crew cut, he led the newly formed SEALs at Team 2 in physical training, PT. On his dog tag in the space for religion was written PT. To stay in shape, Rudy and his teammates played soccer for hours. 32 men on each team. Broken legs were common. The SEALs used a variety of tactics to get out of Rudy's fitness runs, making excuses, going to the restroom and not returning, and ducking into the bushes during the runs. Rudy also served as chief of 10th Platoon, which relieved 7th Platoon in Me To, Vietnam on April 8, 1968. After a week of learning what 7th Platoon had been doing and going out on ops with 7th Platoon SEALs, 10th Platoon set out to do their thing. Rudy carried an imported version of the German Heckler & Koch 33. The assault rifle used the same .223 ammo as the standard issue M16, but was much easier to maintain in the jungle, and it had magazines that could hold 40 rounds. He carried the large magazines in the pouches of a Chinese AK-47 chest pouch, 2 straps tied around his lower back and 2 straps across his chest, with the 3 largest pouches suspended over his stomach. Rudy stored his inflatable UDT life vest in one of his trouser pockets. The SEALs' meat and potatoes were snatch and grabs. At night, Rudy and his teammates crept into a thatched hut and grabbed one of the Viet Cong, VC, out of his hammock. They wrapped the VC up and disappeared with him. Most VC had enough sense not to struggle against the green-faced men who came at night. The SEALs turned him over to the CIA for interrogation. The SEALs also used the South Vietnamese police to conduct interrogations. Then Rudy and his teammates would act on that intelligence the next evening and snatch a VC who was higher up in the food chain. One of the prisoners switched sides to join the SEALs. The defector offered to take the green-faced men to their next target. The SEALs kept the turned VC in the front as their guide, letting him know that if he led them into an ambush, he would likely be the first killed. And if the enemy didn't kill the guide in an ambush, a SEAL would. After the guide worked hard enough to earn the trust of Rudy and the other SEALs, they made him a scout and gave him an AK-47. With their Vietnamese scout, Rudy and 6 other SEALs rode through the night on a landing craft mechanized, nicknamed the Mike boat, that was loaded with weapons, M60 and 50 caliber machine guns, a 7.62 minigun, and an M29 mortar. It dropped them off on the shore and they patrolled a mile until they came to a paddy dike. Rudy brought up the tail as rear security. Then they crawled in 8-inch deep water until they reached a trail. The SEALs set up 3 claymore mines facing the trail, preparing to ambush an 8-man squad of VC. 20 minutes later, Rudy and the others were fighting off sleep when at least 8 VC showed up on the trail. The SEALs were waiting for all of the enemy to enter the kill zone when the VC's point man noticed some tracks, stopped, and called back to the others in Vietnamese, "Someone is here." The SEALs' Vietnamese scout shot the point man, and the green-faced men launched their ambush. 2,100 steel balls exploded from the claymores in 60-degree arcs. SEALs fired. The ambush literally tore the enemy apart. When the smoke cleared, the commandos hurried in, gathered weapons, and searched the scattered body parts for intelligence. While they were searching, AK-47 rounds came at them from the darkness. Visitors. Soon, muzzle flashes appeared. The VC were closing in. Rudy and his teammates decided it was time to bug out and reversed back to the river. The point man became rear security while Rudy led them sloshing through the rice paddy. The volume of fire from behind increased. They had stirred up a hornet's nest. Rudy had never led a run of SEALs at Little Creek who were so motivated. The radio man called the mic boat and said, "Drop mortar," requesting prearranged mortar fire. The mic boat lobbed an 81mm mortar shell over the SEALs' heads that missed the enemy. The radio man talked the next mortar round closer to the SEALs' rear, giving the enemy a loud surprise. When the SEALs neared the mic boat, it opened up with all its guns on the pursuing enemy. The incredible firepower shredded trees and VC, silencing them. The SEALs climbed aboard the mic boat and motored up the Black River. By the end of the war, SEAL Teams 1 and 2 had been decorated with 3 Medals of Honor, 2 Navy Crosses, 42 Silver Stars, 402 Bronze Stars, one of them Rudy's, and numerous other awards. For every SEAL killed, they killed 200. In the late 70s, Rudy helped in the formation of Mobility 6, Mob 6, SEAL Team 2's counter-terrorist unit. The SEALs on the John F. Kennedy probably got tired of me, but they shared some of the horror stories of basic underwater demolition SEAL BUDS training. They told me about skydiving, scuba diving, shooting and blowing things up, and catching shrimp in the Delta. They worked hard and played hard. Lots of camaraderie. One told me that he got his orders to BUDS as a re-enlistment incentive. I wanted what they had. During a 6-month deployment, the John F. Kennedy stopped in Toulon, France, home of France's aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle. I had a serious talk with the SEAL lieutenant about what it took to become a SEAL. To re-enlist or not to re-enlist? It was too big a bargaining chip with the Navy to waste. Talk about divine intervention, meeting the right people at the right time. I went to my commanding officer's stateroom and knocked. He cracked his door open. "Commander Christensen, if you can give me orders to BUDS before my contract expires, I'll re-enlist, sir." "Get your ass in here." He opened the door. I walked in and stood before him. It hadn't occurred to me that I might have hurt his feelings. I thought I'd joined an elite unit before, but now I knew about a unit that was more elite. There would be no satisfaction staying where I was. "You don't know what you're asking. BUDS is not what you really want to do. Take your money, go back home, and finish your education. You have no idea what it takes to become a SEAL." He spent the better part of an hour telling me what a crazy thing I was asking. "Thank you, sir." Still in France, 3 days before I returned to civilian life, my commanding officer's right-hand man, the executive officer, XO, called me in. "You've been a great crewman and we'd like to keep you around. What do we have to do to keep you in the Navy?" "I already told Commander Christensen, sir. If you can give me orders to BUDS, I'll re-enlist." I went to my hotel, preparing to fly back to the States and become a civilian again. The day before I got on my Air France flight, my buddy Tim showed up at my door. "We just got a teletype in this morning with your orders for BUDS." "Bull. Seriously, the skipper told me to bring you back to the boat so he can talk to you." They're screwing with me. This is going to be some kind of farewell surprise. I went back to the ship and entered the ready room, packed with pilots, crew members, and others. Squadron officers sat in airliner-type armchair seats. A coffee machine and magazines rested on a table. On the Ouija board, little airplanes showed the position of each aircraft on the flight deck. A black and white monitor displayed landings on the flight deck. The commanding officer called me to the front. He handed me my orders to Buds. Everyone clapped and gave me a send-off. The orders were contingent on me passing the physical screening test for Buds in Jacksonville. I flew back home to Georgia, and Laura drove me down to Florida. During the nearly 6 months I'd spent on a deployed aircraft carrier, I didn't have much time to swim, except for rescuing the crew of my crashed helicopter. Before that, I mostly swam with fins on. The test was without fins. I hadn't practiced the side stroke and breaststroke required for SEAL training either. Although I don't remember the exact physical screening test requirements when the SEALs tested me, they were similar to today's. A 500-yard swim within 12.5 minutes, rest 10 minutes, 42 push-ups in 2 minutes, rest 2 minutes, 50 sit-ups in 2 minutes, rest 2 minutes, 6 pull-ups before dropping off the bar, rest 10 minutes, run 1.5 miles wearing boots and trousers within 11.5 minutes. 12 of us showed our IDs and paperwork. Then we stripped down to our swim shorts. I was nervous. At the sound of the whistle, we swam. As I neared the end of the 500-yard swim, the SEAL called out the time remaining. 30 seconds. Fighting to swim against each second, I finally reached the end with only 15 seconds to spare. One applicant was not as fortunate. 11 of us got dressed in T-shirts, long pants, and boots. We did our push-ups and sit-ups. Again, I passed. 2 more applicants failed. After the 2-minute rest, I jumped up on the pull-up bar. The stress of failure can sometimes cause people to implode. I passed, and 2 others failed. Only 7 of us remained. Each activity by itself wasn't so difficult, but doing one after the other was. We stepped onto the running track. The SEAL wished us good luck. I passed. 1 guy failed. Out of the 12 of us who started, only 6 of us were left. The cuts didn't stop there. Some applicants didn't score high enough on the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, ASVAB, the intelligence test all potential recruits take before entering the military. During dental, medical, and hyperbaric chamber tests, more guys failed. Some guys failed for poor vision or being colorblind. Others failed the psychology testing. One psychology questionnaire asked the same questions over and over. I wasn't sure if they were checking the reliability of the test or my patience. One question asked, "Do you want to be a fashion designer?" I didn't know if fashion designers were crazy or if I was crazy for not wanting to be one. It also asked, "Do you have thoughts about suicide?" Not before this test. "Do you like Alice in Wonderland?" How should I know? I never read it. The prophet Moses would have failed the psychology test. Have you had visions? Do you have special abilities? After the paper test, I met with the psychiatrist and told her what she wanted to hear. I passed. For the hyperbaric pressure testing, the chamber was a large torpedo-looking thing. I heard that some guys freaked out during the testing. The claustrophobia, air pressure, or both got to them. I stepped inside, sat down, and relaxed. Slow breathing, slow heartbeat. The dive officer sealed my door shut. I went down 10 feet, 20 feet. I could feel the air pressure increasing. At 30 feet, I was already yawning and swallowing in order to relieve some of the pressure on my ears. The pressure inside the chamber simulated going down 60 feet underwater and staying there. No problem. After 10 minutes at 60 feet under, the dive officer slowly relieved the pressure inside my chamber until it had returned to normal. "Good job," the dive officer said. Out of 100 applicants, I was the only one who passed all the tests. I was beyond excited. Laura and I returned home in time for Thanksgiving, and I didn't have to report to Buds until early January. It felt good to be home with her and Blake for the holidays, smiling and laughing, eating warm turkey with hot mashed potatoes and steaming gravy. The only easy day was yesterday.
And that was Chapter 4, Russian Sub and Green Hero from SEAL Team 6 by Howard Wasden. Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. And until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.